Hello and welcome back to Wyvern-Hearted Ink and Friends. You can call me Claymore, and today I'm going to be talking about my process with my comic thus far. So to start off, most people don't create comics physically or traditionally anymore. I mainly did it because that is the medium that I am comfortable with. I have had a little bit of digital experience with art, but very, very minimal. So with my more recent comic, Crestfallen, I was just doing the line work for all the pages, and after I was done doing the line work and I had scanned them, I was just taping them together so that it made a sort of book, and that is what inspired today's video, where I am putting the pages from my first comic, my first book of my first comic, Harkøth's Blood, into these plastic liners because I wanted to kind of have the feeling of using my original artwork for the comic and just putting it all together as a sort of book format, because I really loved how my Crestfallen version came out, and I really love being able to just flip through the pages and feel like it's almost a finished book even though it's just barely been started. So that's the premise. The main thing that I'm doing here today is I am cutting all the pages and putting them in plastic sleeves to go in a binder, mainly because I don't really have a way to preserve a lot of this art, and it is really precious to me because I have spent a lot of time and energy on it, but also because if anything happens to my computer, I don't want to completely lose all of the work that I put in. I don't want to lose all those files. And so this is my backup way of preserving things just in case I need to rescan them. Today's video, I'm going to be showing the original art that I did for my first book in my comic book series, Harkøth's Blood. This is the second version of this first book. Previously, I had done another version, and it was my first attempt, right? It was my first attempt at really making a watercolor-based comic book. And so it was okay, but the art style was not developed yet, I would say. My art style really hadn't come fully into view until about like the last couple of years. So by the time that I felt like I was able to actually publish the one that I illustrated back in 2018, I was looking at it, and like I had printed off my first copies, and it was just, it didn't live up to what I wanted it to be. So I ended up re-illustrating the entire thing. I decided that near the beginning of the pandemic, I finally got it fully illustrated. I fully edited it over this last year, and it is nearly ready to be published as a physical book. It has been a very slow process because I have not regularly had access to a computer, and I have not regularly had access to programs that I can do the kind of illustration work that I need to do digitally. That has been a very slow process for me, figuring out like what sizing I want things, figuring out what sort of text and everything else has been a very difficult process of thinking that something fits for my work and then feeling like once it's actually printed out on a page, it's unreadable. And that is still my struggle today. I'm still trying to figure out what font to use for a lot of my comic, because I feel that on your phone, obviously you can zoom into things and like read them. You can figure out what things are saying, but font is a really hard thing to decide, especially because I am not using my own handwriting as the font. I have considered it. I am still considering it, but I just don't think that my personal handwriting really suits it. I think I could edit and develop a font to work for what I'm looking for. but I just haven't found anything yet that really fills that niche, and I might have to buy a specific font just for my comic, just because I haven't really found anything that I really like that really suits it. There are things that fit within the bounds but aren't quite legible for how small of text I'm going to be making with that font, so that's a big issue. Doing comic books traditionally takes a lot of work, takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of thinking power, because you can't go back and like redo things unless you want to start an entire sheet over, especially when you're working with watercolors, because watercolor can be removed to a point, right? But it can't be fully removed. So once you have decided on a layout, you have to commit to that layout. And because I don't do anything digitally, or I have very little digital knowledge on how to fix that stuff, and very little access to those kinds of programs, I have to commit to whatever I decide on initially. Sometimes that can be incredibly frustrating, and sometimes it can be really nice, because a lot of the time I like the first design I come up with, and I don't tend to like anything that I come up with after that, sadly. I wish that I did, because I hear from a lot of professional artists that you're supposed to come up with several drafts, because usually your first one is not your best. But I tend to find the opposite is true for me personally. Anything that I come up with after the first initial idea, it just isn't really worth the time and energy of me sitting around waiting for another idea to strike. So but obviously that can cause issues, because sometimes I end up committing to a concept or a layout, and I end up not liking it, and it's a lot of extra work for me to completely redo everything. So I've been considering switching completely. I don't like the idea of entirely switching over to digital. I still don't quite have the knowledge and access to all the things that I would need to be able to in the first place, but considering my recent issues with my hands, especially, I think that doing something that would require less processes on my hands would be better than something that requires more. And I don't have a lot of experience with digital work, but as far as I understand, it seems like it would be easier to reconstruct things than if you're doing them physically. And that is the only time I will say that digital art is ever easier, because outside of that, it's the same level of understanding of art and the same difficulty, obviously. It is hard to create art no matter what platform you are using or what media. Not that I think that it would be easier to do it digitally on the concept of digital art is easier. No, it's not. It takes a lot of understanding that I don't necessarily have. So I get that, like, digital artists are not appreciated in the way that they should be on that space specifically. But nonetheless, I have been considering switching over because it is a lot of work, and it is a lot of commitment for me to make, especially as someone who is not really making money off of this at the moment. I do have my Patreon, and a couple friends donate to that, but it's still a long process, and we are in the middle of very bad economic situation. So I don't have a lot of money to spend on the things that I want to use to put into my platform, but I'm working towards getting there. That is the goal, is getting to a place where I can make money off of just doing my art and just writing and illustrating, and no longer having to rely on some normal 9-to-5 sort of job, because currently, the only kind of job I can work is in a factory, and getting me to a place where I can actually make enough money where I'm saving some, I'm able to like purchase more things and do more stuff, but it is detrimental to my body, and it has been a hard thing to figure out the balance between the two. So I think that hopefully going to be switching at least somewhat over to digital to try and make it easier on myself, and hopefully switching over to becoming a more successful business in that aspect and being able to do something that doesn't deteriorate my body for a living. Outside of that, I have worked traditionally almost exclusively on everything that I've created thus far as comic books and illustrations. I haven't really done any digital illustrations that are exclusively digital. Getting size down is really hard for me. I can't conceptualize digital art in the same way that I can a physical piece of paper in front of me. And so I'm hoping to get a tablet that would be a display tablet and not just a black slab that I have to look at the screen to understand things. Getting that hand-eye coordination is very hard when that's not what you grew up doing, and that's not like part of your usual, especially because as a very tall person who already struggles with making sure that I sit up straight and that I do things to help my posture, doing something like that really hurts my back. So trying to find something that works better for the kind of person that I am and my physicality. Additionally, comics are made on very large slabs of paper. I believe A1 and A2 are usually the main sizes that you go for. And when I first illustrated my comic, that was the size paper that I was using. I was using like specifically comic paper, and I was using watercolor on comic paper that was not made for handling watercolor. And that is why, or a lot of the reason why, on top of my technical ability, that I was not very happy with the way that a lot of those pages turned out. I was thinking too small with how big the pages were, and so I put in a lot of little tiny detail and little tiny characters and things, because I was like, there's this giant slab of paper, but I'm not thinking about how large that is going to turn out in a final product. And so I realized in creating my second edition of the first book in the series that I wanted to illustrate something that was closer to a normal sheet of paper for me, which personally I tend to use 8x10s, that sort of size. Paper is generally, all my sketchbooks are roughly that size. I do occasionally, as of recently, I've gotten smaller sketchbooks, but I usually tend to stick around 8x10, 8x12, 9x12, that sort of sizing. And I think that that helped me get a better idea of how much would be happening in a page and how big I needed things to be on that page. When I have been drawing just the line work for Crestfallen, I've gone even smaller and done about half that size to draw out just the line work for the pages. I'm not doing the coloring traditionally or physically. I'm planning on doing all of the color for that comic digitally, and that's part of the reason that I was okay with going in a smaller size. Generally, you want to draw larger in traditional settings. You want to draw larger than what your final product is going to turn out to be, simply because if you don't, then everything is going to have to be spread out, and it will become more pixelated and more awkward looking because it's not made for that size. Whereas if you make something larger than the final product, then there's so much more detail in that little space that you're able to make it look smoother and cleaner. So doing art this way has been a lot of back and forth and trying to figure out what works for me, what makes sense to my head, and that sort of stuff. So I'm hoping to have an update on when Crestfallen is going to finally start being colored. I'm still not finished with the line work just because my hands have not been really handling art very well lately. I'm hoping to see a doctor soon. I think tentatively, because I don't like self-diagnosing myself, but what can you do in this economy? I believe I am developing rheumatoid arthritis, which does normally happen to people in their early to mid-20s, and I am currently 26. And I'm developing incredibly sore joints, mainly in my hands, but it's also started spreading to my feet, my ankles, my wrists, my forearms, and a little bit to my hips and back. And some days it's a lot more painful than others. I'm usually able to handle it without taking any pain meds, but it is still an issue, and it does regularly cause me trouble to do everyday tasks like opening jars and plastic bags. Anything where I have to use the dexterity of my fingers is somewhat painful. So it's hard. It's hard to deal with. It's hard to think about, especially because as someone who wants to continue my work as an artist and as someone who wants to keep doing this, and I have a passion for it. Like I there's nothing else that I want to do in this life other than love animals and create beautiful works of art and beautiful novels. It has been a hard thing to conceptualize and deal with, but I'm hoping that I can move away from my current work and find something that doesn't bother me quite this much. But that's where I'm at currently. So, yeah. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this preservation, life update, comic update, sort of amalgamation of a video. I just want to do something easy on my hands. I have a lot more projects that I want to show you guys very soon, but they're just not quite ready, and I don't like making videos about stuff that isn't complete. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.